Hello, everyone, and welcome to How to Live Life After Loss. And I am thrilled to welcome Tara Nash, my next guest. So, Tara Nash was formerly in the fashion business in London until she finally couldn't run from her grief anymore. She decided to change everything in her life and moved to LA to study a master's in spiritual psychology. It was during this time, thousands of miles from home, that she finally confronted the death of her parents and her conscious grieving began. Tara's father died suddenly of a heart attack when she was 9, and her mother died of breast cancer when she was 21. No therapist or coach ever attributed her struggles to grief. This inspired Tara to uncover the mysteries and misidentifications of grief, and she has a passion to share how sitting with the pain can lead to powerful transformations. Tara teaches grief yoga, Kundalini yoga, and breath work to help clients move grief through the body. She facilitates an 11-week group course called the Conscious Grief Program, an opportunity to sit in community and learn about the grief process. Tara now lives back in London with her toy poodle, Kenny Rogers. So
Mhm.
welcome, Tara. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. So Tara, can you tell us a bit about yourself and what led you to do what you do now, please?
Yes, certainly. So, as you kind of said a little bit in the bio, when I was in LA studying the spiritual psychology, I realized that I had not consciously grieved the death of my parents. And my father died very suddenly of a heart attack when he was 42 and I was 9. And that was in 1990, so a long time before we had the internet and the resources that we have so available now. And my mother remarried very quickly. And I guess our family just stayed busy, and we were praised for being strong and just carrying on. And that marriage to my stepfather went wrong, so she got divorced, and then she ended up getting breast cancer, and she died when I was 21 years old. And I just modeled what I had been shown, be strong, stay busy, keep going. And it really wasn't until my mid 30s that I realized that I had been suppressing so much for so long. And when I actually honestly started to read books about grief for the first time, and I thought, oh my goodness, I can't believe I've no, because I'd had therapy. I knew that I was having my struggles in life, but it wasn't really being shown to me how grief can last a long time. And in reading these books, I thought, wow, why, as it said in my bio, why has nobody really pointed that out to me? And I think that unless you've had a very personal and direct experience, um, then we're not, like, apparently therapists don't always do a terribly long, amount of training on grief per se. So I thought this is an area that I really want to dive into more, because I feel like people don't really understand the impact of grief and how it can really stay with us for a long time if we don't do, conscious grieving, essentially.
Yeah, thank you. And when in your bio you mentioned you couldn't run away from your grief anymore. When you moved to LA, were you aware that you were running away from grief or not?
No, I wasn't. I mean, I think I was always doing things in an attempt to, avoid my feelings. And then when, I knew that I wanted to study this spiritual psychology, and I'd always been asking myself in my life, what is my purpose? Where do I go when I die? What is the point of life? And this course, was all about that.
Mm.
And I think it was the first time where I had um I stopped, essentially. And it was the first time when I could really process and feel And before that, it had just been on the trajectory of life, which so many of us are on this hamster wheel, whether it's, you know, you go to school, you go to university, you get a job, you get married, you have a kid, you blah, 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 you know, and a lot of people don't get to that stage until they're, you know, past midlife. I was in a way, you know, privileged to be able to go and do that course in LA and deal with it in my mid-30s. And I'm very aware that many people won't have that time and space in their life until much later. And that's the funny thing about grief. We can run from it, we can push it aside, we can repress it, but I do believe that it will always be there at some point, waiting for us. And, you know, other people obviously have very different experiences where they can't repress it or, you know, run away from it, that it's just overwhelming and it's there, and there's nothing that they can do to avoid it. But as you know, we're all really unique in how we cope, and everyone's grief is completely unique to themselves.
Lovely, thank you. So could you explain what grief yoga, Kundalini yoga, and breath work is, please, to those who don't know?
Yeah, so Kundalini yoga is called the yoga of awareness, and it's a quite a different practice to, you know, the hatha vinyasa yoga that most people are aware, more commonly associate, you know, strong postures where you're balancing and holding them for a long time. And Kundalini is more short, repetitive movements, and you're often chanting mantras. There's quite a lot more breath work involved than regular yoga, I would say. And it's a very beautiful practice, and it's very spiritual, and you don't really need to even wear like lycra yoga clothes. So when I first did a class, I thought, gosh, this isn't yoga. And then I just kept feeling called back to it. And for me personally, I had done Hatha Vinyasa yoga teacher training prior to that, which was very powerful. But there was something about the Kundalini that just, I don't know, it just melted away more layers. And I just cried and cried and cried and cried and cried during that training. So it just touched my heart so deeply that I really felt like I wanted to teach that more than Hatha Vinyasa yoga, which is more commonly known. And the grief yoga, interestingly, so one of the assistant teachers on my teacher training of Kundalini said, oh, because she knew that I was interested in the grief space, and she said, you must meet Paul Denniston. And he had trained with her as a Kundalini teacher. And then Paul created grief yoga because he said, you know, I really wanted a class specific to my, you know, what was going on for me in his grief. And so interestingly, like I can see, you know, that quite a lot is influenced by the Kundalini tradition. And again, it's a yoga that you don't need any prior experience of. They're very accessible to all kinds of people and body types, and actually some of the grief yoga can be done on a chair. And if you do look up Paul Denniston, he does have you know, practices if you just want to do them on a chair, and obviously that is very specific to grieving. So he talks about how, you know, grief yoga uses movement, breath, and sound to release pain and suffering, to return us back to a place of peace. And there's 4 parts of the class. So the first part is awareness. The next part is the expression. And in the expression, you know, there's like chanting, mantras, you know, really postures where you can move energy of anger, frustration, resentment, quite empowering postures. And then you go into a calmer state of connection. And then the last part is like into surrender. So yeah, you can have some big releases in those classes, and a lot of the time when we're grieving, you know, our tendency is to like hunch over, and you know, all types of yoga will encourage you to open your chest and bring your shoulders back, which is really, really important when we grieve, because the reason we go like this is to really protect our heart and our lungs. And that's why grief can physically impact us. And the breath work is the same. You know, we tend to breathe very in a shallow way. I mean, even if we're not grieving, that tends to be how most of us are operating, because we're living in very overstimulated, stressful lives. So we're not breathing into our bellies. We're all sort of doing little breaths. And the breath work that I facilitate is called revelation breath work. And there's an opportunity in that session. There's a song which is called the Primal Scream Song. And I encourage the participants to make some sound. And, you know, it's very infrequent that we are given a controlled space to have a tantrum, essentially, or to have a scream, or, you know, to make carnal sounds of crying. And that song is, you know, that whole song is dedicated to a release. And then you come back into this active breath for the last song. So it's very cathartic. And, you know, if not, it doesn't resonate for everybody, and some people may not feel like it's authentic to them to scream or have a big cry, but I think any of these practices, if you're willing, if you go into it with a sort of willingness, just to have a set the intention to be open and to see what comes forward, I think that, you know, our soul connects with these exercises, and something quite beautiful can come from them, and it can be extremely healing, and as I said, you know, cathartic as well.
I imagine people feel better because, as you say, we're not really used to just letting it all out.
No, we're not. And even in the grief yoga, I mean, it really depends on what I've planned for that session, but there is a specific exercise which is a tantrum, and it's literally lying on your back and, you know, stamping your feet and your wrists, and, you know, so much of grief is like, why me? Why did this have to happen to me and my family and in my life? And, you know, we can be all in our like logic and good and nice people and not want to have expressions of anger, for example, but it's so natural. You know, anger is an emotion that we honestly need to welcome in more and express more. But because we're always told, you know, that sort of together people don't get angry, or good people don't get angry, we just push it down all the time. And the problem with pushing down anger, you know, a bit like pushing down grief, it will result in things like depression. And it will have an impact on our health, you know, our physical health.
That's what I was going to say. So anything that we repress, especially feelings, it will come out in another way, whether that's illness or, as you say, depression. It has to go somewhere.
Yeah, it does. And I think we're becoming much more aware of like how our emotions are linked to our physical health. But I realize, I guess because I'm in this world and talking to people like yourself, you know, I think everyone's aware of it. But, you know, only recently I was speaking to somebody, and they're so frustrated and they keep going to the doctor and the doctor hasn't got the answers. And I'm like, trying to explain that it's really would help, you know, to understand your emotional well-being and work on that and speak to a therapist And that person was just like, thinks I'm crazy, has no understanding of that at all. It's like the doctor is the only person that's got the answers. And it's like, wow, I thought most people are kind of coming into this understanding that the body, the mind, the soul, everything's connected, that we're really educated now about the Eastern influences and how much wisdom there is there, and that the Western doctors just don't necessarily have all the answers. And yeah, and you realize, no, not everybody's tuning in on this channel.
Yeah. So I think you've answered already, Tara, but do you think sitting in the pain of grief helps us to heal? And if so, how?
I know that sounds like such a and I think we have to get a balance. Like, I think that we can't sit in it all the time because that is so painful and so uncomfortable. But I think that we are extremely afraid of pain these days because we have nice warm homes, hot showers, soft beds, food delivered to us. Our lives are very, very comfortable compared to what they would have been, 100 years ago. And so when we feel emotional discomfort, it's natural for us to want to change that feeling. But there's all kinds of ways that we can change that feeling in our day and age. But I think we have to be aware of, like, yes, if we want to take a break from it, and whatever that might be for you, there is a healthy model for this, and there is a theory called the dual process model, where we take a break, whether that's like watching some comedy or going shopping or having a glass of wine, forgetting about your grief for a bit is a good thing. But then also knowing that it's also not a bad thing to do things that remind you of your people and connect you to them. And if that's upsetting, looking at photographs or organizing their things after they've gone, that's going to be hard. But how can you support yourself, as you do those things? So I think it's good to get a mix. And I always say to people, like, although pain sounds so awful, it's like there can be a lot of beauty in pain. And think about all of the creativity that comes out of heartbreak, all the music that's ever been made. And yeah, sometimes when we just sit in and write or paint, or incredible things can happen when we're in pain, yet we just have this very like negative relationship with it, that we feel like we have to run from it as soon as possible. So yes, I do believe that great things can, transformation can come from that place. And I always remember a yoga teacher sitting in front of me and was like, most people who sit on a yoga mat in front of a class of people haven't become a yoga teacher because everything's been great in their lives. Generally speaking, most people who are sitting on that mat have gone through something really uncomfortable, and that's why they've been drawn to a practice like yoga. So yeah, I think that there can be profound transformations that come through pain.
Mm. It's a very good point about the songs, because every song that's a really good song, it is about love or a broken heart or something.
It really is.
And Tara, can you tell us about your conscious grief program, please?
Yes, so that's an 11-week program, which I've actually kind of made 12 weeks this time around, because what I noticed, like midway through, people need a little bit of a break. Maybe it'll end up being even longer in the future, but it's a group program. So I have maximum of 5 people in a group, and I take quite a lot of time to make the groups because I speak to each person, understand about their situation. They want to ask me questions, and I try and put people in a group with other people who share the same loss. So like everybody who's lost a parent will be in a group, or if it's a spouse, and so on and so forth. And it's on Zoom, and we meet once a week on a Sunday, and each meeting is 1 hour, 15 minutes long. I introduce a topic, and then we open it up for sharing. And in between the weeks, there's a WhatsApp group that we can stay in contact. And generally speaking, you know, I think one of the hardest things about grief can be feeling lonely. And we feel very much like we're the only person who are feeling these things. And so listening to other people makes us feel like we're not completely crazy. You know, it validates our experience. Everybody who shares in the group teaches somebody else something in the group. And, you know, through some of the groups, they're people they still meet now, you know, and have formed friendships with people that will probably never meet in real life, because they're often from different countries. And that's a really beautiful thing, you know, to make new friends from a really hard situation. So yeah, the course actually follows this book, which I've just written, Conscious Grief: Transforming Pain into Evolution and Growth. So if you can't, or you don't feel like a group is for you, because it's not for everybody, you could also buy this book, and each chapter is based on a week of the course. So it follows my personal experience, but it also includes the stories of many other people, people that I've interviewed on summits like this, and people who have been in my groups, or I've facilitated in one-to-one sessions. So yeah, that's
Excellent. Well done, because I've seen lots of 5-star reviews. So excellent, Tara. And when was it released, please?
It's pretty much exactly a month ago, yeah, because it was the 29th of February. But before that, it was released on Kindle version first, yeah, and now it's available on Audible too.
Excellent. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And so do you see every obstacle that we go through in life as an opportunity to grow?
I do. I do. I feel like one of the most profound parts of me understanding my life, you know, and this is really might sound very foreign to some people, but when I did the spiritual psychology, the idea is that, you know, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And that means we come here to learn and grow. And we come here for our soul to evolve, and we come here many times. And on some level, we choose actually the life that we're going to have. Our soul chooses our parents, the experience it wants to learn in this lifetime. And that idea, even though, you know, might be impossible to prove, that for me made a lot of sense. And it made me feel empowered. And why we think we should all have this rosy, happy life, you know, I don't know where that came from, but life can be beautiful, and it can also be hellishly painful. And nobody's owed a long life, or, you know, endless happiness. You know, part of being a human being is the challenge. And if we have the perspective that obstacles are opportunities to help our soul learn and grow, like, yes, this might be the most painful thing that you have ever felt and have ever been through. And yet, what are you learning through it? You know, I've interviewed people who've been through some horrific things, and they have told me, I'm a much better person now because of it. I am much more compassionate. I value things like love and relationships, where I used to value money and success. and I didn't give a shit about other people. Like, wow, okay, you have to go through something extremely challenging to learn that. And how amazing that you learned that, you know, because it could have made that person harder and tougher. And so I think if we keep that orientation of like, what is this obstacle, what is this, you know, presenting to me as an opportunity, we're going to be more empowered people, as opposed to sitting in there, why me, which I would also like to reiterate is very important as well, because we can't just skip over like, oh, I'm going to be this enlightened being. And, you know, I understand that this is all, you know, part of my evolution and growth. No, we have to sit with the pain and we have to say, why me? That's really important as well, I think. So yeah, but I do think we can be in a much more empowered place if we live from that perspective.
Beautiful, thank you. So looking back, Tara, on everything that's happened in your life, what's the one thing do you think that could share with our audience to help them?
Well, I think that having lost my father at such a young age, and I said, I was always thinking, why am I here? What is the point of being here? I don't care if I'm here or if I'm not here. You know, honestly, I spent a long time feeling like that, like not no, like who would choose to be here? I'm always like very fascinated with what's on the other side of life. And but the more work that I do here, I mean, life is so short and it's so fragile, and you and I could be having this conversation today and tomorrow we could be gone. And we spend so much time sweating over the small stuff and not enough time being grateful for the present moment, not enough time thinking what is really important to me. Because if you're not happy and you're not living a life that you really want to live, then you need to make some changes. I mean, I always think that you know, when people say, oh, what's your 5-year plan? I always think more like, well, what if I had a year left to live? Like, what would I want to do? Because I think that really gets you very clear about prioritizing things and people. And we don't know that it's any, like, we get told a lot that like on the other side is blissful and, you know, and wonderful, which I'm sure it is. But at the same time, I think that the people who are in spirit are probably looking at us thinking, oh my gosh, enjoy the things about being human, god damn it, you know, like you have a body, you have flesh, you can touch people, you can have sex with people, you can hug people, you can kiss people, you can eat ice cream and chocolate and, you know, laugh and all of the things that our human bodies allow us to do. And they're probably like, make the most of it. Like, stop bitching about the woman next door or complaining about what you don't have, and just enjoy being a human being, enjoy being in the flesh, and yes, not take it for granted, you know.
Beautiful, I love it. And can you tell us about your free gift, please, Tara?
I know I actually meant to ask you that. Did I do it? Did I say a breath work or a
You said a free breathwork class online.
okay. Yeah, I wanted to double check. So it will be a free breathwork class that I'd love to invite you to. And I normally always schedule those around the full moon because that's a very powerful time to like have a good release. So yes, I will make sure that there's a code and that I'll email you if you subscribe to that about the next class. And all you need to do is be lying on your bed. That's the best place to do it. I always say I like to use an eye mask, you know, for sleeping because it helps me keep present. And I have my journal next to me because I often find afterwards that things come through that I want to write down and not forget. So yeah, that's it. All you need to do, lay on your bed. You don't need a mat or anything like that. You can get a little bit cold while you do it, so it's good to have the blanket. And if you live with anybody, tell them not to worry if you start making lots of screaming and carnal sounds. Otherwise, you know, you can always scream into a pillow as well to stop the sound being so worrying.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And where can people find you, Tara?
So my website is tara-nash.com, and that's not always up to date, but that has my newsletter to sign up on. And that's the best thing because I advertise like what I'm doing through my newsletter mainly. And then on my Instagram, which is Tara_Nash_Seeker, Seeker. Those are the two best places to find me.
Well, thank you so much for that. And thank you, Tara, for this interview. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
I have too. So thank you so much, Tessa.
Oh, you're welcome.